Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name's Natalie Griffith. I'm the CEO and founder of Pressbase, which is an independent agency that does PR and marketing and branding support for a whole range of developers and publishers and tech companies. I've been in the games industry 27 years this year, and I've been doing PR and marketing type things for the last 17 years. What I want to talk about today, though, is what it says on there, social media. So I think we probably all know that the effectiveness of social media is super important when it comes to getting the word out there about your game or your studio. And we also know that the power of the crowd in terms of sort of word of mouth, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, has become bigger than ever before as well. I kind of throw some stats up here. There's without question more people playing games, more people accessing games on a bigger variety of platforms, and actually more games being released as well. So we've potentially got a bit of a problem there. There's a ton of opportunities to reach people, but so many other things taking their attention as well. So how do we kind of approach that? So as I said, I want to talk about social media today, but I want to broaden the definition of it a little bit into all of your kind of owned channels. So generally when we talk about marketing communications, we talk about owned channels, earned channels, and paid channels. So the paid ones being obviously your advertising, things that you're actually spending money on, and promotional things. The earned channels are the media outlets and things like YouTube, where you're actually pitching your game or your company and you're earning the coverage from that. Everything else is an owned channel. So it's not just social media, it's also your website, your blog, any other kind, your forum, any other kind of areas where you've got the opportunity to communicate with your potential community. So the main message I want to get across today is that in all of these things, it's quality versus quantity that matters. We'll hopefully show you that it's not worth getting hung up on that sort of potentially vanity-driven quest of trying to say I've got X number of followers on Twitter or X thousand likes on Facebook. The kind of more sane approach to all of those channels is to make sure that the people that are there are engaged and they care about your product and they're interested in sharing what you're talking about. So how do you go about getting that engagement and getting that buy-in from the beginning? Well, hopefully you'll be able to give you a little bit of a heads up on that today. It's a big topic, so we're only really going to be able to scratch the surface, but it'll give you an idea of how to get started or potentially how to improve what you're already doing as well. The most important thing to remember here, though, is that social media and the content on your own channels, they're not a destination in themselves. It's more like an endless runner. You've got to constantly keep changing your tactics and adapting what you're doing, and you can't kind of take your foot off the gas once you get started. But I'm going to break it down into 5 simple steps. So we want to be asking ourselves the question right at the beginning, what is it that we want to achieve? We'll be looking at, from that, how we build a plan, thinking about what content you put onto those channels and actually making it quality content that counts, looking at whether it works or not and achieves what you want it to do and what you need it to do, and also making sure that you're going to be ready to evolve as you go along. So let's start at the beginning. So before you start work on any new project, you usually think about what the point of that all is, why you're doing what you're doing, or at least you ought to. A solid communication strategy should always flow out of your broader business goals or your broader studio goals. It shouldn't be the thing that leads it. So while it's good to set targets for your social media and your growth in terms of numbers, never let the tail wag the dog. Your goal shouldn't ever be, I want to get really big on Facebook, or I want to get that tweet retweeted by X number of people. So right at the beginning, you need to take a step back and try to decide and document what it is that you want to achieve, and over what time period. I think thinking about what you define as success yourself is really important. Everybody has a different definition of success. Don't let anybody tell you that your game hasn't been successful unless it's achieved A, B, and C. It's up to you and your team to decide what is a success state for you. So there may be a whole load of different motivators. Sometimes that success criterion is simply earning enough money to keep making the next thing. But often it's much more nuanced than that. You might be looking to learn how to develop for a particular platform. You might be looking to get some experience of working with a partner, or just learning about a different type of game that you've not made before. Either way, making sure that you know what your motivations are will help you make sensible decisions for your promotion and communications as well. Also, that kind of sense of being able to keep your eye on the prize and keep focused on what it is that you're trying to achieve, that's going to help you make some of those tougher decisions down the line as well. One of the most important lessons you can learn, particularly in promotional stuff, is to know when to say no. You might just have been offered the cover of Edge or something, but actually if it doesn't fit in with the timings of what you're trying to achieve and doesn't help you get towards your goal, then you need to be brave and turn it down. So, to continue that game development analogy a bit further, when you're planning your work, you start at the beginning and you look at what skills you've got in your team, what resources you've got available, the amount of manpower, the budget you've got, all the available time, and then you scope out something to fit those resources. So the same is true with your marketing communications as well. You need to be really aware of what's possible before you commit to doing anything. And so you need to be thinking about it right at the beginning. Gone are the days when you can kind of bolt on a PR campaign 2 weeks before launch and not think about it the rest of the time. So have a look at the skills and the resources you've got in-house. Can you handle managing various social feeds and owned channels yourself from within your own team? Do you need to get some help? Do you need a consultant in? Do you need to hire somebody to take on that work? Often people hire people in to help support that kind of thing, and that could be great if they're focused on it. But I'd offer one word of caution about never giving your social feed management to the intern. It can seem like a really nice, efficient, easy way of doing it, and it makes it something that you don't have to worry about yourself. But the best social feeds are authentic and they're transparent and they're really embedded in the whole story of the project. If you've got somebody that's very new to the business, new to the industry, new to even knowing what it is that you're trying to achieve as a company, then you're not going to get that quality of interaction on social. You're going to struggle to have that sort of coherent voice. And so that's just going to make everything less effective. But the flip of that is, don't assume that you need a ton of people either. You can actually, there's always something you can do, and you can achieve an awful lot with very little. But you have to start small and you have to have patience. You can't fast track building a community on social media. Or at least you can if you throw money at it, but 9 times out of 10, if you do that, you don't end up with quality people who have chosen to be there organically, and they're the ones that you want. So a few years ago, I started working with a small startup developer called Payload Studios, who are based in London. They were working on a modular vehicle combat construction game called Terra Tech. And we started there beginning of 2014. This is the very first Facebook post and the kind of original sort of Twitter profile. And it took us quite some time to build up a community, but we worked slowly and steadily at it, and it really paid dividends in the end. So I worked with them for about 2.5 years. And in the first few months, it was basically the original founder and the programmer, his co-investor, and myself. And I was doing most of the social planning at that point. Then over time, they hired more people. The team got bigger and bigger. And they're now at the point where they've got enough stuff coming in just through sales of their early access game, because they're not to the 1.0 release yet. That, those early access sales are now supporting a team of about 15 or 16 in their second office in King's Cross. So you can see that those first posts, 1 like on the first one, 2 likes when we updated our cover photo, and chances are they were me and the founder. But it's having that patience and knowing that actually if you're creating a name for yourself across all of your channels and events and other places, people will come to you, but you need to get into good habits right at the beginning. So from a standing start, we initially only used Twitter and Facebook and the website for Terra Tech. We managed to get a big enough head of steam over 6 months of working on the community that we could galvanize them all to successfully carry us over the line on a Kickstarter campaign. We were aiming for £35,000 and hit just nearly 40. From there, they've continued to build on it, and as I say, they've now got a really big established team. And all of that was with practically no traditional media coverage as well. So you can see what's possible if you're focused on it, even with a very small number of people. So once you've decided on the resources you have at your disposal, the next important question to ask is what social media channels are going to be useful to you. And in order to do that, you need to understand that not all channels are created equal. It may seem obvious to a lot of you, but not everybody uses Twitter the same way they use Facebook. Not everybody uses Snapchat the same way they use Instagram. And yet, even though it seems obvious, I still see a huge number of people that are just hooking up their Twitter feed to automatically push something to Facebook and to their blog and to everywhere else. So the same stuff is going everywhere. People like to follow you in different places because they like engaging in those places in different ways. So you need to give them something different. Now, this is an age-old meme that I'm sure you've all seen before, but it actually makes quite a valid point. It's not a million miles away from where we're at the moment. But what we wanted to do is try and take the main kind of owned channels that most of us can be using or can be considering for game promotion, and split them into 4 main categories based on the main reason that people engage with them. So first of all, we've got the ones that people generally use, and as I say, there's a lot of averaging out here, and obviously some people will use things in different ways. But generally, people use all of these kind of ones for networking and connecting with people, whether that's personal or it's professional networking. So that includes LinkedIn in there. And also including in there your game forums and any in-game social features that you're building into the game as well. So the kind of places people tend to go more for entertainment or to learn stuff is your kind of streaming and video outlets. And then things that are a little bit more lifestyle, that fit into people's lives without them necessarily seeking out specific brands, are things like Instagram and Pinterest and Snapchat. Snapchat particularly in the use of sort of custom emojis and lenses. There's been quite a few games that have done custom lenses, and a few games industry events, in fact, that have done custom lenses so that you can promote the fact that you're at the event by using it there. And then the things where it's more sort of consumption of information and news. So again, the obvious kind of blog and Twitter, newsfeed type places, and then your own blog, your own website, and actually email as well. Don't underestimate the power of kind of well-targeted email marketing. If you can gather names and addresses at the beginning, it's really useful. Now, obviously, there's a few of those that appear in a couple of columns, and that's fine. As I say, this is a kind of an averaging out, but it's helpful to start thinking about things in different ways. And if you think about your own usage of any of those platforms, you'll realize that you engage with them in a different way, but yet when we approach them for game marketing purposes, we often tend to lump them all into one big bucket called social media, and we don't differentiate as much. So pick the channels that are best likely to reflect the sort of things you want to share and the kind of people that you're likely to be wanting to communicate with. You need to be confident that you understand how those channels work. So don't put somebody on your Instagram account that's never run a personal Instagram account, for instance. They won't quite get the sense of how it flows and the give and take of everything and how people interact with each other. And also, as I said before, don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to kind of say, you know what, we don't actually need a Facebook page for this game. Don't just have one because everybody else has got one. You know, if you're building up a game over a long period of time, maybe it's an early access or it's an alpha, and you want a place for people to hang out and talk about what you're doing, then, you know, maybe if you're creating that community, then Facebook can be useful. But if you're doing, you know, the latest Match 3 puzzle game, you're not going to create a massive Facebook community in a million years, and it's a waste of effort to put your time into that. So, as we've said, all the way along, keep going back to what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then think about why people are using those channels, and that will then help you to decide. Okay, so once we know where we're going to be putting stuff out there, how we're going to run things, we need to make sure that we kind of get people on board on each of those channels, and the way to do that is to give them content that they're going to engage with. In order to do that, you need to try and understand the psychology of how and why people get interested in particular things, and in particular brands. So I'm afraid I'm going to bore you with a quick marketing 101, so apologies to anybody that's kind of come across this before. We're going to have a look at some basic kind of sales and marketing principles. So has anybody heard of the acronym AIDA? A-I-D-A? No? Tumbleweed? Excellent. Okay, so it's basically a kind of fairly long-held principle of sales and marketing, and although it's evolved over the years and you can kind of debate the different specifics of each stage, it's still a really useful benchmark to be aware of when you're thinking about, you know, attracting people to your game. So, simply, it works like this. So if anybody's heard of the sales funnel, that might be something that you probably have come across. So that's this, basically. So what that posits is that for every decision we take, but particularly decisions that require us to part with money and or time, which is clearly a game in both cases, we go through these 4 stages before we commit to anything. So that's awareness, interest, desire, and action. So in reality, we might actually go through these stages really, really quickly. So if you think something as simple as buying a bag of crisps, your awareness is, okay, I'm a bit hungry. The interest is, oh, maybe I fancy a particular type of crisps. The desire is then, right, I'm going to go and buy a bag. And the action is, oh, there's a shop over there, I'm going to go and buy them. Now that's a split-second thing that you don't even separate in your brain as separate stages of a process, but that is all happening. And that's exactly the same if you buy a snack as it is if you buy a car. It's just that the period of time is spread out. And the idea with this is that you have to compensate for the fact that not everybody will go all the way down that funnel to the action, which in our case is downloading or buying the game. So the main principle here, and it's something that we see with kind of full-on user acquisition campaigns with the likes of King and Zynga and the really, really big boys that can throw lots of money at it, is pouring as many people as possible into the top of that funnel, hoping that the number you get out at the bottom is enough to hit your goals. So when this comes to games, it's fairly easy to see how that process can carry across to how we think about what games we're interested in. So it could be that you hear about a game for the first time because one of your friends has been liking their page on Facebook or has shared something. It may be that you realise several of your friends are doing in that, and you start to show a little bit more interest in what it could be about, and maybe you go and have a look at their webpage, or you follow the page that your friends followed on Facebook. You then get even more into it. You realise it's something you might want to play. You'll go and seek out their YouTube channel or find some Let's Plays. You might read some reviews, check out what other people are thinking about it. And that's your desire to actually want to purchase the game. And then when it comes to it, hopefully we've whetted your appetite enough that when the moment arrives, when the game launches, or we're looking for you to join in with a particular thing, you're then ready for that action. But you can't jump straight to the bottom A without going through the others. Everybody has to go through that thought process, and they'll all go through it at a different speed. So how does this relate to our social media channels? Well, we need to bear all this thought process in mind when we're thinking about where people hang out on social media. What we did recently for... Oh, sorry, I've got to say loyalty at the bottom once people have engaged with the game. What we did recently for a game I'm working on called Sky Saga from Radiant Worlds, which is a sort of large-scale creative sandbox MMO. We've been in closed alpha for just over 2 years, and we're looking towards beta at some point in the future. What we did a little while ago, well over a year ago now actually, is we took that sales funnel and we mapped the channels that we were using or thinking about using onto that funnel to try and estimate, based on our experience of where we were looking at players and how they were interacting and what sort of things they were interacting with. We could make an estimate as to where they were in that funnel, where they were in that thought process when they were engaging with us on different channels. And that became an incredibly useful exercise because we began to realize that we could differentiate our content and we could actually start to put less things out or just adapt things ever so slightly for a different channel, and it would have much more impact. So in our case, Facebook was definitely the kind of first level awareness stage. It's people that are right at the top of the funnel generally that see the game on Facebook. And I should say this isn't like a template. This is going to be different for every game. It depends what you're trying to achieve and who your target audience is. But for us, that kind of top level of things was definitely Facebook. And so we soon realized that actually if there was no point in us continuing to share in-depth developer diaries, for instance, or a technical blog on what's happening in the game on Facebook, because the players at that stage aren't that interested. They're just at the general impression stage. Whereas we get much further down the funnel, they were then starting to follow us on Twitch, they were reading the blog, they were putting stuff onto Reddit, and then you could see then that there was a point in sharing that kind of stuff there, which kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier about not necessarily creating that one bit of content and then blasting it out in all directions, because it's going to be wasted. So what we then started to do was take this and use that as the basis of our planning. So instead of saying, oh, it's Tuesday, what post are we going to put out? We'd be looking at our broader goals over a particular campaign period. So we've had 10 different phases of alpha, and each phase had different things added to the game and different things changed and evolved. So we would take that plan and the goals from the dev team of what they were trying to achieve in that next alpha, and we craft a communications and media plan that was based on that. And we would then take down each channel and work out how to fill that out. So let me explain how you can actually adapt something slightly without having to create 15 different bits of content to achieve the same thing. So this is going back to last year, actually, when we launched Alpha 8. And just gives you an idea of how we had a lot of very similar content, but we tweaked it ever so slightly for the different channels. So this was the Facebook post, which I say is a general awareness thing. So we talked about the kind of 2 or 3 really big ticket new features, so the blueprints, group adventures, and then we put the trailer up there. We uploaded it natively, which is important for Facebook, and I'll come back to that in a bit. But it was that nice kind of general burst. Instead of saying this is changed from Alpha 7 to Alpha 8, people at that stage of the funnel wouldn't have any sense of context, any reference of what it was before. So saying it's changed is irrelevant. So it's just, here's this cool stuff. When it came to Twitter, one of the things we realized, and I should have pointed out on the previous slide actually, with Twitter and email and a couple of other things, we realized that actually we were attracting people for different stages of the funnel with that. And over time, we've realized that actually it's not, we thought we were targeting all 4 points, and then we realized that actually it's probably from about interest down. So the awareness bit is not quite so relevant on Twitter. So what we did, instead of putting the whole trailer on there, because Twitter, we created a customized short version of it that picked out some of the key points. Again, we just mentioned a couple of the key features, so people nearer the top of the funnel would still appreciate it, but there would be enough change and enough difference by highlighting the things we highlighted in the teaser bit. It showed things that were different enough from the previous versions that those that were further down the funnel would still get it. Should be audio on there. Okay. So when it came to the website, again, we had a chunk of the main trailer in the background of the site. And it was back down to that kind of the basic welcome to the world of Sky Saga. It's the basic entry level as people are starting to get a little bit more aware of it and they're starting to pay more attention. All we had to say was have that main introductory thing on there, and we just put the new trailer in the back. So then when it came to the forum obviously is people who are really heavily engaged with the game. So we didn't need to have the shiny trailer or sort of, wrap all the new features up into sparkly PRE language. It was literally the patch notes. It was like, these are the bugs we've fixed. This is what's changed. This is what you can expect in the new alpha. Then when it came to Instagram, which is very much more a kind of lifestyle type channel, it's very much people kind of experiencing and celebrating the moment or the feel of something. So we've consistently used that as a bit of a behind the scenes type channel. Often that is something as simple as concept art or work in development, but more often it's actually the people behind things. So this is a guy called Boomkin, who is our streamer, who was actually one of our earliest community streamers and then came on board to run our Twitch and YouTube channels. So what we did with him is a couple of days before Alpha 8 came out, we did this little teaser video just on Instagram. Don't know if this is going to work now.
Come here, you have to see this. Come here, look.
So it's really silly, really quick and easy to do, but it played really, really well on Instagram, and it was a nice tease that then led into the rest of the reveals on the other channels. So obviously that level of planning requires a lot of in advance thinking, and we're lucky at Radiant Worlds that we actually have quite a big team to work on this kind of stuff, but it's still possible to think like that even with a much smaller team. You can see that the changes we made, even if you removed the need to create separate content on Instagram, the changes on the other sides were very subtle, but just enough to make them more relevant to the audiences on those channels. So I don't expect you to be able to read all of this, and again this is sort of from a year ago deliberately, because this is our kind of planning documents, but we have a Google spreadsheet the size of England that has all of our kind of plans on there, and so we will work out what our communications goals are. So the orange strip on the left there on that particular sheet shows the roadmap for the upcoming alpha. It shows the main sort of communication themes that we're talking about, so the main new features or the main kind of players that we're trying to attract, and then we'll basically work that all the way across with kind of what are the key beats on particular days and the main highlights on each of the channels. And then the second one is the sort of working document that the comms team use to actually plan out the specific copy and sort out the assets. So as I say, this looks like, a ridiculously big thing that's impossible to handle, but it doesn't have to be this, this big and this scale. Having a simple structure like that can actually help you think about channels in a different way and make it quite manageable. So think about what messages you want to get across. Make sure you're repurposing them for the appropriate places, and don't automatically share everything everywhere. Stop and think, and then post. So often people stop at that point and kind of think, okay, that's great, we can chuck some stuff on Facebook every few days and it'll all be fine. But unless you're doing the D and the E of this circle, then you're missing a trick. Also, even if you've gone to this level of planning and this level of thought process, it doesn't guarantee that actually things are going to go the way you want them to. So it's really, really important that you keep looking at the data, looking at the analytics, and making sure that things are doing what you want them to. So every channel's got different ways of looking at its effectiveness. You can Google all sorts of free and paid solutions for sort of data mining, creating graphs to show you how things are working and measuring the various stats. But even if you can't afford to plug in a third-party solution, if you can, I've had a lot of success with Sprout Social and Social Bakers for anybody that wants to look into those. There's still an enormous amount you can draw out of the built-in things, particularly Facebook Insights. And actually, it's arguably Facebook where you'll need to pay the most attention. If you feel it's important for you to be running a Facebook feed at all, then that's the one that's most critical to get right, because you can very easily damage your own performance on there. So that's kind of a variety of bits and pieces from different feeds and different clients that I work with. But for those of you who haven't dug into Facebook Insights before, that's just a tiny snapshot of the kind of information you can pull out. So for those of you that aren't aware, the things that people see on their feed from your page on Facebook, it's a tiny fraction of the things that you want them to see, basically. The Facebook algorithm, which is like this secret black box that they never reveal exactly how it works, but it changes kind of every couple of days, it seems. It constantly adapts in response to what the users are liking, commenting, sharing, and all the things they're interacting with, and then gives you more of that in future. Which in principle doesn't sound like a bad idea. You get to see more of what you care about and less of what you don't. But it's inevitably not quite as simple as that, because it's also skewed by advertising money as well. The other new, fairly recent thing with Facebook as well is that they actually skew their algorithm now in favor of things that have come to you via friends and personal connections against things that have come from brands. So they're automatically weighting brands and company pages lower than things that people have liked on from friends' pages. So it can be a bit of an uphill battle. It used to be about 10 or 15% of your followers would see everything that you posted. Now it's 5 to 10% if you're lucky. If you sponsor a post or pay to boost things or pay to acquire users, then you get that extra bit as well. But as we've said, that's never really all that useful to do, particularly buying users. But if you do pay attention to what's working and you really dig into the data that Facebook Analytics gives you, then you can actually increase your content organically way more than you'd think without having to spend a penny. So there is a mine of information in there and a whole load of different things I could talk about on it. But what I've done is I've pulled out some of the kind of handful of kind of key tips that we found effective and that they're good start points for data for you to start monitoring. And then once you get into that habit and get into the habit of adapting your content accordingly, then you can dig deeper. So the first one is having a regular posting schedule. Post regularly, but not too frequently. One a day at the most, maybe every other day, depending on how much content you've got to share. But the important thing with this is that the algorithm favors what you're doing when it gets into a positive momentum. You can't do one post and then 3 weeks later do another and expect them to help each other in any way. Also, don't post again too quickly. So I said kind of a maximum of one a day. Occasionally you don't have the choice. Occasionally you might have to, for contractual reasons or some agreement, post something else later. But when you actually start getting a series of posts and you look at how they perform in relation to each other, you will see that actually if you post something too quickly, and I'm talking within a few hours, 4 or 5 hours of a previous post, they basically cannibalize each other's organic reach. So that's the organic reach being the number of people that see it without you having to pay to promote it. Another good tip is actually, once you get a handle on what things give you good organic reach, so which things are popular, which things get good engagement and therefore get shown to more people, once you get a sense of that, if you've got a really important announcement coming up, you can actually start to bank some good reach ahead of that. So push out a handful of posts that are the type of posts that you know people like and that they want to see. And then that will start to build up your positive impact on the algorithm. So when you have your important announcement, that stands a better chance of being seen by more people without being paid to be boosted. So the other thing to look at is choosing the best times, and this is a really easy one. From even when you have a relatively small number of followers, just go in there and see what times they're online, what times are they engaging with Facebook and engaging with you, and then schedule your posts for them. Quite often people treat the Facebook newsfeed a bit like Twitter, and it's like when they think of something or when it's ready, they drop it out there. But actually pre-scheduling stuff on there, which it allows you to do really easily, you can put it on at any time of the day and then just say, make this live at 6 o'clock. It's so much more effective and so a really easy thing you can change quite quickly. So that most pages that I've adminned have had a similar curve to this, where you might have a little bit of a peak in the morning, often when people are going to work, and then it usually goes up kind of late afternoon and into the evening. More often than not, on most of the feeds I work on, we're posting at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock local time to us, which is in our case is all UK time. And then some of them will then start to fade interest after about 8 o'clock at night. This one is actually from the social page of a band that I do the social media for, and it's interesting that their kind of active thing is later into the evening, probably because people are getting home from gigs and then deciding to go and seek them out online afterwards. The other important thing to do is to mix up different media types, because Facebook will also punish you if you do the same thing every day. So if you post a picture every day, or you do a video every day, or you do a link every day, at some point, even if one of those things started out being effective for you, ultimately they're not going to be effective because it likes variety. It won't continue to serve what it sees as the same thing to people over and over again. So this is a snapshot from quite an early chunk of, I think, Terra Tech's feed, yeah. And you can see I've just highlighted there the section that shows what media type it was. So this was, it's kind of showing all the dates of it, summary of what the thing was, the reach that it had and the engagement that it had. But this bit highlighted is the type of asset. So we've got, this is over a course of a week or so. So we've got 2 graphics, we've got a link out to somewhere else, 2 videos, another link, video, picture, link, picture, picture. So keeping that kind of pattern going is really useful to do. The other thing as well to know is that these days video is where everything is, really, and generally, until very recently, video has consistently performed the best by a long margin on Facebook. We've actually started to see GIFs performing slightly better recently, but generally video performs way better than other things. But the important thing on Facebook, as I said earlier, is to keep it native, upload it to Facebook. If it's a massively long video and it's something that's kind of a huge long let's play that you've done yourself or like developer diary thing, then yes, put that on YouTube, but don't link it. Don't link out to YouTube on the Facebook page, because when you link out of the Facebook ecosystem, the algorithm punishes you again. So what we often do if there's quite a long video and it feels too long to put onto Facebook is we'll create like a teaser version of it and put that up like we did with the Twitter one I mentioned earlier. The other thing with video as well is to use subtitles. So there's about 85% at last count of Facebook video is watched with the sound off. And it's a similar percentage of people that access Facebook on mobile. So make sure that your visuals are really, really strong and they will work well without the sound. Also make sure that if people are listening with sound, that it's worth their effort to do that. So you've got to make sure the sound is good too. But if you've got somebody that's actually, particularly if you've got like a talking head on screen like this one I'm about to show you, make sure you have subtitles on it as well, because then people can get the gist of it if they're sitting watching on the bus without the sound on. It's not going to play. That was going to play. Oh well. That was a video with subtitles and sound. The other really important thing, and this is one of the biggest ways you can actually hook into getting the Facebook algorithm to favour you, is paying attention to what Facebook themselves care about. So keep an eye on some of the kind of social media websites that kind of track what's happening and what the trends are. Pay attention when new features are announced, because whenever you use a new feature, that is something that the algorithm will favour because they're trying to encourage people to use it. So a couple of examples of that. This is a very small chunk of time with the band I was saying I work with. And when I first started working with them a couple of years ago, they were touring a lot, sort of spring into summer. They were doing a lot of festivals across Europe, and they'd got into a pattern of taking a picture of the crowd at the end of each show, which was great, only it started to look like every post was exactly the same, because you've seen one picture of an excited crowd at the end of a gig, you've seen 100. So we started to tweak that a little bit. We started doing it with them including themselves as like a selfie with the audience. We started doing kind of video clips of them with the audience. We started tweaking the time of day, and adding in other little bits and pieces that were really pushing the new things that Facebook was worried about, because at that point Facebook was really pushing video. So just by adding a handful of posts like, thank you for coming and joining us at this festival, interviews, Q&As, all kinds of bits and pieces, we went up, the organic reach went up about 1.5 times in the first sort of 6 or 7 weeks that we were working together, and it more than doubled in the first 3 months. And that was a reasonably well established feed of about, at that point, 15 or 16,000 people. And just those tiny little tweaks of subtle changes that weren't really impacting the time it took them to do anything. It just meant that they were doing things in a slightly different way and timing things differently, had that huge impact, and twice as many people seeing what they wanted to see. Another good example of that is on Sky Saga. So one of the things that's always performed quite well for us on Facebook, because I think it's a general interest, general first impression thing, is votes. So people voting for kind of what, their favourite enemy or a favourite player creation or whatever. And so those votes always encourage good interaction because people are voting or commenting in order to vote. But as soon as they introduced the new Facebook reactions and we put those onto the votes, then the performance of those went through the roof. It was incredibly powerful way of getting people to engage with your posts, which helps the algorithm anyway. And because it was a new feature Facebook were wanting to push, they gave it that extra boost as well. And when we started combining those reaction votes with GIFs, they went even more crazy. We had, in the first, I think, 3 months of starting to do that, the performance was like 3 times better on average than when we used to just do them with still graphics and with no reactions. So it is possible to game the system if you're being clever, but don't think you've ever got it nailed, because particularly with Facebook, as I say, it changes all the time. So it is a constant plate spinning exercise, but if you keep paying attention to it and you keep experimenting with new things, it's really going to reap dividends. Okay, so the whole point of looking at all this data, it's all very well having lots of data and having lots of information, but if you don't do anything with it, it's all a bit pointless. So you need to be looking at all of that data and all of that information in the context of what we said right at the beginning, which is what are we trying to achieve and who are we trying to attract. So beyond those sort of day-to-day tweaks that we've talked about, you also need to think about the actual channels you're using and evolving that over time. Never kind of hang on doggedly to a channel that might have been really useful for you 6 months ago, but actually is sort of seeming to die a little bit. Have a think why it's dying. Is it because of the content you're putting on there? Or is it because that it was attracting people at a particular part of the funnel, which isn't so relevant with where you are in development right now? Sometimes there's things that are really useful when you're really early in something like an early access game that cease to be useful later on. So I want to go back to Terra Tech now. So I said, we kind of went through the first 6 months with our community building and then continued to expand on that. But this gives you a quick insight into like our first year and how we changed and evolved things over time and gradually added new channels and dropped some. So January 14, they started prototype development. Nothing really to see or show particularly at that point except for some concept art and some tech demos. The following month though, we set up Twitter and Facebook and the website just so that we had our markers in the sand and we were starting to talk to people. In March they had their first demo that we took to Res, which is the first public show. That then generated a lot of interest back onto our social feeds again. The following month, we started streaming regularly, which seems quite early for a game like that, but they chose to keep it a sort of conscious part of their promotional process, and for a good 1.5 years, they streamed every single weekday at the same time and started to attract quite a good following. We also took it to another game show, it's the Gadget Show Live in the UK, which is much more of a consumer sort of tech and gadget and game type show, and that attracted a different audience again, so then people started interacting with us on social in a different way. We were then ready to have a demo that we could actually give to people rather than having them play it in a controlled situation at a show. So we then launched an IndieDB page, which was incredibly useful for the first 6 or 9 months. So if you're doing a PC game and you're going through that sort of developing with the community and heading to early access type approach, it's a really useful way to get some really, really valid and constructive feedback early on. But after about 4 or 5 months of using that, we realised that actually we'd gathered enough head of steam elsewhere and were attracting other people. The game had developed in a certain way that people were moving on from interest with it from IndieDB, so we stopped using it. We then hit another consumer show there, and we launched the Steam page and the Steam forum at that point as well, which again kind of gave us another great surge of people, but it was another channel to manage. Middle of June, we hit an indie festival called Radius Festival in London, and we launched our Kickstarter. So you can see we had all of that work going up to that point, gradually building people up through all of those different places, so real-world events as well as online places where they could talk about the game, and then triggered them all at the beginning of our Kickstarter. Kickstarter itself is a whole other thing, and I've done talks about that before, but one of the key takeaways with Kickstarter these days is that you have to activate people in the first 48 hours of your campaign, otherwise you're toast. So if you've not got that community built up already, you're going to really struggle. So at the end of July, we're getting towards the end of our Kickstarter, and we pushed the Steam demo out a week before the end of the Kickstarter, which was absolutely perfect timing as it turned out, because then suddenly you had a flood of people playing it on Steam, seeing the potential, and helped push us over the line. So then from August, we then went into a kind of beta period, and we opened our own closed forum for the Kickstarter backers to give them that extra sort of feeling of inclusivity and sense of involvement in everything. And then the public forum happened in December. So that's just the first year. It wasn't until probably midway through 2015 that we started to get YouTube coverage of any note, and we had very, very little traditional press coverage, like I said. So you can see how evolving things over time as your game changes and as people get more interested in different ways is worth doing. So just a quick reminder back at that, and hopefully we've kind of seen that there's benefits in tackling different things at different times, and making sure that you're constantly thinking about what kind of message everybody needs to see. So don't think of it as we have this one message to push out today. Think of it as who is going to care about this, where do they sit, and what do the other people care about. So you might be wanting to do different things at the same time. So just to wrap that up then, got to think about what you want to achieve at the beginning. Set those goals, make them achievable, make sure everybody in the team understands what you're working towards. Put a plan together that is also achievable and looks like it's going to hit your goals off. Then start thinking about your content. Make sure it counts. Make sure you're producing things that you think people are going to want to see. Oops, not too far. Make sure you're checking that it works, and make sure that you're ready to evolve when you analyze the data as well. Right, you messed up that end. There we go. So yeah, the main thing is to make sure that you also don't forget that social media isn't just about broadcasting. So we've talked a lot about getting your own information out there, but make sure you understand the value of talking to your community, engaging with them, asking them questions, helping other people, amplify other people's news as well, get some cross-promotional work going on. So don't just be a broadcast machine. Make sure that you're building this community for a reason and that you want to engage them. They are the lifeblood of your success, after all. If you head to that link on my site, I've put together a few kind of useful, there is a link to the slideshare of this, and there's also some useful resources that might be good for you to have a look at. There's a variety of kind of social media strategy templates that you can look at and use as a base. There's also a really, really good social channel image size cheat sheet up there that somebody has created and updates regularly. That's really useful when you're quickly getting all your graphics together. There's also another sort of definition about the marketing and sales funnel, so if you wanted to read into that kind of concept a little bit more, you can. And there's also an interesting article about channel differentiation and how you can kind of change things to help your plans. So hopefully that's given you a sense of why these things are important, how you can tweak them to your benefit, and I wish you success in the future building your own channels and building success for your games and your companies. Thank you.